everybody. Welcome back to the channel. So, revisiting my roots here. Today we're going to be doing some more soft-spoken book reading. A little bit different. We're going to be reading two children's books tonight. I wasn't super pleased with the outcome of the whispering video I did yesterday, so I'll likely continue to experiment with that in the future, but for now I'm just going to stick to what I know works. So yeah, tonight we have two books. We have the classic Brown Bear, What Do You See? And one of my childhood favorites, Curious George. Now, I don't know that I've read this collection of stories specifically, but I always really loved Curious George. So I think we'll start with Brown Bear, What Do You See? Brown Bear, What Do You See? By Bill Martin Jr. Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a redbird looking at me. Redbird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me. Oh, very unicorn-esque. Blue horse, what do you see? I see a green frog looking at me. Elvis illustration. Green frog, what do you see? I see a purple cat looking at me. Purple cat, what do you see? I see a white dog looking at me. Oh, this kind of reminds me of my childhood dog and a Labrador. White dog, what do you see? I see a black sheep looking at me. Black sheep, what do you see? I see a goldfish looking at me. Goldfish, what do you see? I see a teacher looking at me. Teacher, what do you see? I see children looking at me. I see, so it's kind of designed to be read before probably a class of kindergartners. Children, what do you see? We see a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, a goldfish, and a teacher looking at us. That's what we see. Pretty short book. I mean, clearly what they're going for is teaching kids colors and animals. So perhaps this is for even younger than kindergarten. Might even be for preschoolers. All right, here's the thicker book here. That was just a sample of what's to come, but this is a larger book, so I hope I can get it all in frame. Here we have what looks like a pretty typical suburban neighborhood. We have a small child peering out the window here. Oh, I think this is Curious George. I guess Curious George, I don't remember much, but it looks like he's either delivering newspapers or stealing them. I'm not quite sure. We have a young girl jump roping, a little wiener dog, a small, what looks like almost a labradoodle, a woman, boys playing ball, a father in his robe. Oh, and this is, what is his name? I'm sure they'll mention it. It's been so long. But he's Curious George's owner. That's what I remember. Or pal, rather. Okay, so these are the table of contents here. I say we just start from the very beginning. Let's see where it takes us. Curious George and the Firefighters. Fire Station 3. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, joined Mrs. Gray and her class on their field trip to the fire station. The fire chief was waiting for them right next to a big red fire truck. "Welcome," he said, and he led everyone upstairs to begin their tour. He's front and center, very engaged. There was a kitchen with a big table, and there were snacks for everyone. The fire chief told them all about being a firefighter. George tried hard to pay attention, but there were so many things for a little monkey to explore, like that shiny silver pole in the corner. Where did the pole go? George was curious. Don't do it, George. Oh, there he goes. Why, it went back downstairs. There was the great big fire truck. There was a map of the city, and there was a whole wall full of coats and hats and big black books. Big black boots, sorry. George had an idea. First, he stepped into a pair of boots. Next, he picked out a helmet. And finally, George put on a jacket. He was a firefighter. Suddenly, bing, 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 bing. Uh-oh. State of emergency. The firefighters all rushed in. "This is not my helmet," said one. "My boots are too big," said another. "Hurry, hurry," called the fire chief. A bright red light on the map of the city told him just where the fire was. There was no time to waste. One by one, the firefighters jumped into the fire truck, and so did George. Mischievous little George. Oh my goodness. The fire truck with all the firefighters sped out of the firehouse, and so did George. The siren screamed and the lights flashed. The truck turned right, then it turned left. Woo, woo, woo went the whistle, and George held on tight. I'm assuming they've noticed the monkey at this point, but I guess they have priorities here. And just like that, the fire truck and all the firefighters pulled up to a pizza parlor on Main Street. Smoke was coming out a window in the back, and a crowd was gathering in the street. "Thank goodness you're here," cried the cook. The firefighters rushed off the truck and started unwinding their horses. They knew just what to do. Their hoses, oh my god, dyslexic. And George was ready to help. He climbed up the hose reel. One of the firefighters saw George trying to help, and he took George by the arm and led him out of the way. "A fire is no place for a monkey," he said to George. "You stay here where it's safe." Well, that's sweet. And what looks like a Dalmatian chased them all the way to the scene. George felt terrible. George sat on the bench and looked around. Next to him on the ground was a bucket full of balls. George reached in and took one out. It fit in his hand just right, like the apple he'd had for a snack. I bet this mother and daughter are pretty perplexed by this monkey holding a baseball. I would be. A little girl was watching George. He tried to give her the ball, but she was too frightened. I also think it's kind of bizarre that this family is just chilling here as a fire has been put out so close. I mean, that close proximity to smoke probably isn't super safe, but I don't know, they have a community gathering here, so it is what it is. George took another ball, and another. "Look," the boy said, "that monkey is juggling." The boy took a ball from the cage and tossed it to George, but it went too high. George climbed up onto the fire truck to get it. Now George had 4 balls to juggle. He threw the balls higher and higher. He juggled with his hands. He juggled with his feet. He could do all kinds of tricks. Like a circus monkey. The boy threw another ball to George. George threw a ball back to the boy. The little girl reached down and picked up a ball too. Soon all the children were throwing and catching back and forth. What a way to de-escalate after a fire. The fire chief came to tell everyone that the fire was out. Just then, the little girl laughed and said, "Look, Mommy, a fire monkey." "Hey," called the fire chief, "what are you doing up there?" "What a wonderful idea," the little girl's mother said to the fire chief, "bringing this brave little monkey to help children when they're frightened." "Oh," the fire chief said, "well, thank you." Before long, the fire truck was back at the firehouse, where a familiar voice called, "George." It was the man with the yellow hat. "This little monkey had quite an adventure," said one of the firefighters. "Is everyone all right?" asked Mrs. Gray. "Yes, it was just a small fire," said the fire chief, "and George was a big help." Now the field trip was coming to an end, but there was one more treat in store. Oh boy, this kid's messing around on the pool. It's a pretty disorganized and dysfunctional field trip. I feel like they probably didn't need the entire fire squadron to take out the small little fire, but each municipality functions differently, I suppose. All the children got to take a ride around the neighborhood on the shiny red fire truck, and they each got their very own fire helmet, even George, and it was just the right size for a brave little monkey. This seems highly dangerous and irresponsible, honestly, but fun, and definitely would be appealing to me if I was a little kid. Okay, so, the aquarium. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George and the man with the yellow hat were visiting the aquarium. "George," said the man, "please wait here while I buy the tickets." George tried to wait, but he was so excited. What was inside? He wanted to look over the walls, but they were too high. Such a curious monkey. Just then, he heard a splash and a whoosh. Water flew high into the air. People cheered. What could that be? George was curious. He hopped over the gate into the aquarium. How surprised he was. Now, where was he? It was darker inside, and there were fish everywhere. George did not know where to look first. In one tank, there were sharp-toothed piranhas. In another tank, there were seahorses. Those are humongous seahorses. Or maybe he's just a really small monkey. And in another tank, there was a large red octopus. George saw a group of children across the room. An aquarium staff member was pointing to different sea creatures. This is a starfish. This is a clam. And this is an urchin. Nearby, there was a long, low, colorful tank. It was perfect for touching. Uh-oh. George was curious. As he reached his hand into the water, a large crab came scuttling out from under a rock and right toward his finger. Snap! Ouch! Poor George. He did not like this exhibit. To be fair, he didn't read the sign. Curiosity killed the cat, buddy. George slipped out a door into the sunlight. But oh, what was going on here? George saw fat, funny-looking black and white fish flying under the water. As he watched, they flew up out of the water. What kind of fish does that? And where did they go? George wondered. George climbed up and into their exhibit, because of course that's what he would do. I mean, they seem, not too alarmed by his presence. I'm sure they deal with all kinds of crap. They were not fish at all, but penguins, of course. George hopped like a penguin, flapped his wings like a penguin, and waddled like a penguin. A crowd gathered and laughed, but when he slid on his belly like a penguin, the aquarium staff stopped by to check on the penguins. A monkey in the penguin exhibit? George opened a door to escape, but instead, all the penguins ran out. Penguins, penguins everywhere. Oh, what a liability this guy is. The staff was angry at George. How could they catch all the penguins? What a mess, George, come on. In all the excitement, nobody noticed the penguin chick falling into the water. No one but George. I mean, to be fair, you know, as much as he's the hero, he was also the villain because he caused this conflict, so um, not as good. The baby penguin hadn't learned to swim yet, as only a monkey can. George scaled the rope hanging over the beluga tank and swung over the water, saving the chick. Oh, of course. The director of the aquarium and the man with the yellow hat heard the commotion and came running. That monkey helped the baby penguin, said a boy in the crowd. No one else could have saved him, said a girl. The director thanked George for his help and made an honorary staff member of the aquarium. Wow. I feel like this book, this character is probably a very interesting influence on young children because it kind of sends the message that, well, if you give into your curiosity and, something bad happens, in the end, maybe it'll work out. Which a lot of the time probably isn't true, unfortunately. George said goodbye to his new penguin friends. He could not wait to come back to the aquarium and visit them again. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious, as we know. George loved to go places with his friend the man with the yellow hat. One of their favorite places to visit was the Dinosaur Museum. A van was waiting for them outside. Climb in, George, said the man with the yellow hat. George looked out the window as the van drove off. Where could they be going? At last, the van reached a rocky quarry. Dozens of people were there. Some were digging with shovels. Others were using pickaxes or other kinds of tools. It's like an archaeological site or something. This is pretty neat. Wait, did I miss? Oh, I missed a page, didn't I? Today's a special day, George's friend said. We are going to do something very interesting. George was curious. What could be more interesting than a trip to the Dinosaur Museum? The man with the yellow hat led the way through the museum. George wanted to stop and look at the dinosaur bones, but his friend kept going, so George kept following. Finally, they walked right out the back door. Okay, here we are. A van was waiting for them outside. Climb in, George, said the man with the yellow hat. George looked out the window as the van drove off. Where could they be going? At last, the van reached a rocky quarry. Dozens of people were there. Some were digging with shovels. Others were using pickaxes or other kinds of tools. Surprise, George's friend said. We're going to help the museum scientists dig for dinosaur bones. Ooh, I wouldn't have them dig for dinosaur bones if I was them. George was curious. Were there really dinosaurs buried in the quarry? He ran over for a better look. Hello, said a friendly scientist. Are you here to help with the dig? People, I think it is very wholesome that people in this society are so accepting of this little monkey. I guess that's a silver lining. George watched the scientist work. She dug up some dirt and put it into her sifting pan. It took a long time to sift it, and in the end, no dinosaur bones. Oh well, she said. Time to try again. But the next pan was empty too. So was the next one, and the one after that. George yawned. So far, digging for dinosaurs was not as exciting as he'd expected. George was curious. Could he help to find dinosaur bones? Again, taking things into his own hands. He found a spare shovel lying nearby. He dug and dug, but he didn't find any dinosaur bones. Well, he was a really productive manual laborer. When he climbed out of his hole, George spotted another scientist. He was dusting something off with a small brush. Oh well, the scientist said. It's not a bone, just a rock. George wanted to help. He picked up a brush and went to work. But it turns out the monkeys are not very good at dusting. Seems like he's doing a pretty good job, to be fair. As he hurried away from the cloud of dust, George bumped into a wheelbarrow. Maybe there were dinosaur bones in it. He climbed up to look inside, but the wheelbarrow was awfully tippy. Crash! George, the wheelbarrow, and a whole lot of dirt went flying. Hey, someone cried. What's that monkey doing? George scampered away, straight up the cliff. Monkeys are good at climbing, so George kept going, higher and higher. They're just so alarmed by this monkey. When he got to the top, he accidentally knocked a stone over the edge. Oh my god, and he's a klutz. That stone hit another stone, which hit another stone, and another. Oh no, it was a rock slide. How much do you bet he's going to uncover the remains of some massive dinosaur? Yep, what do you know? The man with the yellow hat called for George to come down. George wanted to climb down, but he was afraid the scientist would be angry with him. But the scientist didn't look angry. Look, one cried, pointing. Look what that monkey just uncovered. George could hardly believe what he saw. Dinosaur bones. Wow, that is a huge ribcage. After that, the dinosaur dig was even more fun. George helped the scientist dig and sift and dust and take photographs of the bones he had found. I think it'd be really cool if it were actually the case that monkeys were this integrated into society. I mean, society would be a mess, but it seems like it'd be fun. And the next time he and the man with the yellow hat visited the dinosaur museum, George got to see his dinosaur on display. Georgosaurus. Oh, wow. A new kind of dinosaur discovered. It was a big day for George. It was the first day of school, and he had been invited to be a special helper. Interesting. George and his friend walked together to the schoolyard. Some of the children were nervous, but George could not wait for the fun to begin. This reminds me of myself in kindergarten. In the classroom, George's friends introduced him to Mr. Apple. Thank you for inviting George to school today, the man with the yellow hat said to the teacher. Then he waved goodbye. Have a good day, George. I'll be back to pick you up after school. Mr. Apple says, welcome to your first day of school. Guy gives me the creeps, but he's nice to George. The children were excited to have a monkey in class. George is going to be our special helper, Mr. Apple told them. And what a helper he was. At story time, George held the book. At math time, the children could count on George. And at recess, George made sure everyone had a ball. And a well-balanced snack. After lunch, Mr. Apple got out paints and brushes. George saw red, yellow, and blue paint. 3 colors were not very many. George was curious. Could he make more colors? Well, of course you can, George. First, George mixed red and blue to make purple. Next, George mixed red and yellow to make orange. Then, George mixed yellow and blue to make green. Finally, George mixed all the colors to make a big mess. The children thought the mess was funny, but Mr. Apple did not. Oh dear, he said. We are going to need something to clean this up. Everyone, please sit quietly while I look. George did not mean to make such a mess, and he certainly did not want to sit quietly. He wanted to help. It was his job, after all. George had an idea. In the hallway, George found a closet. And in the closet, he found a bucket. In the bucket, he found just what he needed. A mop. There he goes, zooming down the hall. George was on his way back to the classroom when he heard somebody yell, Stop, stop. What are you doing with my mop? The janitor ran after George. Stop, stop. No running in the halls. The principal ran after the janitor. But George was going too fast to stop. He grabbed the doorway and swung inside, and sploosh. Oh, man. The bucket tipped, the mop dropped, and George slid across the floor. You really gotta feel bad for the guy. I mean, he has a good heart, you know. If nothing else, he has a good heart. Now the mess was even bigger. Mr. Apple looked surprised. The principal frowned. The janitor just shook his head. And George, poor George, he felt horrible. Maybe he was not such a good helper after all. The children felt terrible too. They did not like to see George looking so sad. They thought he was a great helper. Now they wanted to help him. So the children all lent a hand and some feet. Well, it's such a nice bonding moment between monkey and human. And before anyone knew it, the mess was gone. That little monkey sure is helpful, the janitor said. It looks like Mr. Apple has a whole class full of helpers, the principal added. At the end of the day, when George's friend arrived to pick him up, Mr. Apple said, "Thank you for all of your help, George. We hope you will come back. Come help us again." The children cheered. They hoped George would come again soon. I mean, it would be a lot of fun to have this monkey in a kindergarten classroom. I was one of the children. George waved goodbye to his new friends. What a great day it had been. He could not wait to come back to school. I wonder, is he enrolled in monkey school? I hope so. He deserves to get an education. George was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, he wasn't just curious. He was excited. So excited, in fact, that he was turning flips and standing on his head. This guy is very tolerant of this monkey. He's a good friend. To George, it's a pizza party. Day, Saturday, time 4 p.m., place, apartment 2. A little girl in George's building had invited him to her pizza party. George had never been to a pizza party before, but he loved parties and he loved pizza, so he knew it had to be good. "George, it's time for the pizza party," said the man with the yellow hat. "Have fun, and remember to be on your best behavior." Yeah, we know how that's going to end. George got to the party in perfect time. "Hi, George," called out the little girl. But oh, what was all of this? The children were wearing puffy white chef's hats and checkered aprons. George got a hat and an apron too. The best was yet to come. They weren't just going to eat pizza, they were going to make it too. "Everyone will get a piece of pizza dough to roll out and make a special pizza," explained the girl's mother. There were many little lumps of dough. "But first, let's play some games," she said. Everyone went into the living room to play pin the pepperoni on the pizza. Everyone, that is, except George. Never leave this guy unsupervised. No, they still haven't learned. He was curious about those pieces of dough. George thought and thought, if lots of little pieces of dough were good, maybe one huge one would be even better. I agree. He gathered the lumps of dough together and squished and squashed them until they became the very biggest piece of dough he'd ever seen. What fun! Maybe rolling it out would be even more fun. This guy really is a virtuoso. I mean, he just does it all. He knows it all. George poured the flour on the table, and he rolled and rolled the dough with a rolling pin. It was messy work. First he bumped over one of the chairs. Then he knocked over the sack of flour. Thump. The floor looked like snow lying on the floor of the kitchen. The flour looked like snow lying on the floor of the kitchen. George liked snow, though, so he didn't mind at all. Soon he had gotten the dough nice and thin. Man, what a way to ruin this young girl's birthday party. But the thinner it got, the farther it spread out. Before he knew it, the dough covered the table, then the chairs, and then George. Made a little for it. Without the flour, it started to stick to everything, including George. George stopped to think. Maybe the dough was better off in small pieces after all. George got a pair of scissors and began cutting up the dough into lots of different shapes. He thought everyone would be pleased. "George, what have you done to the kitchen?" The little girl's mother didn't look very happy. "I think it's time for you to go home now." How surprised and sad George was. Oh, he just can't help himself. Just then, the children burst into the kitchen and saw the mess that George had made. "George, what happened?" asked one boy. The other children looked at the shapes George had made with wide eyes. Wow, George, I've never seen pizza dough like that before, said the little girl, smiling. Well, said her mother, if you can clean up this mess quickly, George, I suppose you can still stay to make pizza. Man, this guy just gets infinite chances. The children all helped George to clean the kitchen. He was lucky to have so many good friends. As they worked, they talked about the pizza. I'm going to make a pizza that looks like a star, said one little boy. And I'm going to make one that looks like a house, said a girl. Once the kitchen was clean, the real fun began. All the children picked out perfect pieces of dough and got to work. They spooned on tomato sauce and sprinkled on cheese. They added lots of vegetables and pepperoni. I don't know why, but I kind of doubt they added the former there. But the pizzas looked wonderful. One looked like a rainbow, another looked like a stop sign, and still another like a balloon. There was even a pizza that looked curiously like George. Well, George, said the little girl's mother, the pizzas taste great, and thanks to you, they look wonderful too. Everyone agreed it was the best pizza anyone had ever seen or tasted. For the second time that day, George was so happy that he turned flips and stood on his head. Of course, it was a little harder to turn flips with so much pizza in his belly, but George didn't mind. It had been a wonderful pizza party. Alrighty, well, we've actually covered a lot of ground. Let's see. Yeah, up to page 123. I think that should suffice for today. I think we've had enough George. I really do appreciate his adventurous spirit and determination to do, the right thing in his own way. He's just perpetually misunderstood, it would seem. I mean, a monkey in a human world, it just, it's not for him. But anyway, I may or may not continue. There might be, I think, probably a couple, maybe three stories left. It may or may not continue, but either way, I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. I hope you were able to relax. Kind of, again, was experimenting with more commentary rather than just straight reading of the book. So let me know if you enjoyed that, or if it was just annoying. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. As always, please comment down below and let me know what you think.